Welcome, brothers and or sisters, to episode 7 of the YouTube edition of Breaking Kayfabe with Bowden and Barry. What seven? Did you give me the loser symbol there, or the
I
seven
was
symbol?
going, wait a minute. Can I count? I don't, that's why I
Oh,
had to
okay,
switch
okay.
over
I thought you were telling me I'm a loser.
there.
Do a little Beck on there for me. But yes, it's episode 7 of Breaking Kayfabe with Bowden and Barry. I am Jeff Bowden. Sometimes they call me the Booker. With me, looking sun-tanned and rested and ready, it's my man Barry. Barry, I noticed you got a little beverage there. What do you got? What do you got in your glass this morning?
So I should say first off, I went to Whataburger last week in Jacksonville, and they sell their plastic cups, and they had 10 different ones. I bought all 10,
Mm.
50 cents a piece.
Wow,
So I had no idea. And I'm like, how much are they? She goes, 50 cents. I'm like, give me every single one you got. And
solid
I bought,
value.
yeah, so I bought this, but I am working right now the iced coffee.
Ah, well, as you know, I favor Pepsi in the morning. However, changing things up today with my Notre Dame cup. I'm drinking a little bit of fruit punch, Barry. Obviously the high sugar content is for me. So, first of all, brothers and sisters, at the time this episode is released, allow me to say to each and every one of you, on behalf of my co-host Barry Rose and myself, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy Festivus. Barry, are we going to have the airing of grievances today? What do you think?
I think we should
Yeah,
because
because I
there's
got
a
a lot of
lot of
problems with you
people that we
people.
have to tell off.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
and a happy new year, but happy holiday season to all of you. Hope you get to spend some time with the familia. And, my sister recently came up, Barry. Big news out of the Bowden household. Barry, I think I told you my sister and her daughter and grandchildren are moving up this way. Ooh, some solid content there. But today, on this particular episode, Barry Rose, we're going to be doing a deep dive on all-time great Christmas wrestling cards. Always keeping that wrestling theme in there, and we may have a surprise or two at the end of the episode. So, Barry Rose, let me just ask you, if you were to say my favorite all-time Christmas wrestling card, the card or something that happened, what would it be?
That's a tough one right there. So Florida wasn't really known for Christmas wrestling cards. Not to say that they didn't have them, but traditionally, in most cases, at least for many years, Christmas Eve and Christmas Day was a day off for the Florida crew. But there was a specific incident in 1982 in St. Petersburg
That might be
where
the one
Jake,
I'm thinking of. That's all I'm going to
I think
say.
it is. Yep, that's probably my favorite right there.
And of course, that was the night Santa came to the matches. Am I correct, Barry Rose?
That is the night Santa showed up. Absolutely.
And for those of you who do not remember, uh, Jake Roberts was a flunky of Kevin Sullivan at the time. And it's kind of hard to believe that Jake Roberts was someone's flunky, just as talented as Jake is. But he was basically Kevin Sullivan's flunky. Kevin Sullivan, was there not a loser leave town match with Dusty in St. Pete
Loser
that
leaves
night?
out.
And
I believe that was the genesis for the Midnight Rider, right?
yes. And so what happened was everyone figured, oh, Kevin Sullivan has run his course. He's going to be leaving. The newest Dusty, feud will be starting with somebody else. But Jake Roberts came down to the ring dressed as Santa Claus, and it was a. I don't know if anyone else had ever done this in the other promotions, but this was to a Florida wrestling fan was extremely unique. I know afterwards, other promotions stole this gimmick, so we have to credit whether it's Dusty or Kevin Sullivan or both. And Jake Roberts came down dressed as Santa Claus, slipped the gimmick to Kevin Sullivan. Kevin Sullivan takes out Dusty. Shockingly, for the people in the state of Florida, Dusty Rhodes has to leave town for, I think it was 90 days. And Kevin Sullivan, of course, bragging about the man being the man that ended Dusty Rhodes' run in CWF. And then the mysterious Midnight Rider appears. And oh, Barry, those videos of him sitting by the campfire in, was it Diablo Canyon? And
Diablo Canyon.
yeah, so I can't remember. What was his horse's name? His horse's name was some sort of maybe it was Diablo also. I don't know, but that was a tremendous angle. and good times. Another card I will come up with, Barry, that was a big thing was in World Class was
Yep.
I believe they did the original angle with Kerry Von Erich facing off with Ric Flair in the cage, Michael Hayes, and who was it? David Manning as the two referees. Michael Hayes in there to keep law and order as a babyface, and of course he does the turn. Terry Gordy smashes Kerry with the door of the cage, and we're off and running with the Von Erichs and the Freebirds for a solid 24 years, I think, something like that. That feud went. So Barry Rose, what I did was I pulled up all-time wrestling cards on Christmas. We're going to discuss some of
Wow.
these as I pull up my cheaters here. Getting old sucks, but it beats the alternative. So Barry Rose, the first card I want to ask you about was from Montreal. Barry Rose, 1905. Barry
Greg Good
Rose.
was there.
What's that?
Greg Good was there, right?
I think he might have been on the undercard, you know. So, but
Yeah.
the headline match was get a load of this since we just had a discussion on this, Barry. Frank Gotch winning a 50-man tournament and losing after losing two matches earlier in the year to Tom Jenkins. Boom.
Tom Jenkins Barbecue.
So yes, Barry and I were just talking about if you're a person that watches this channel that is from South Florida, legendary barbecue spot, Tom Jenkins Barbecue in Fort Lauderdale on Federal Highway, I believe, right by the corner of Davie Boulevard. One of the iconic barbecue joints in South Florida. Truly, I know we got your Barry, you got your Memphis barbecue, you got your Kansas City barbecue, you got your Carolina barbecue, you got your Texas barbecue. Tom Jenkins, I would put that barbecue up against anybody back in the day. Now, I think the original owners might have sold, or one of the guys might have passed away. So maybe part of the reason why they're closing, I don't know, is that quality went down, the customer ratio has gone down. But back in the day, Tom Jenkins, stellar barbecue. Barry Rose, I think you'll agree.
Yeah, what style barbecue was it? Do you remember?
Well, now that I've mentioned all those barbecues, I don't exactly know. I know they specialized in see, they did not sell pulled pork. They sold chopped pork, which I always like better. And
Me too. I'm
they,
with you.
they
Yes.
they did the chopped pork, put a little sauce on that bad boy, with some great sides, and it was really good stuff. And on the walls, Barry Rose, they had all these concert posters, but it was concert posters for your Wilson Pickett's, Sam Cooke, some of your great
Real
art,
music.
yeah, great R&B, Jimi Hendrix, great R&B and classic rock posters, really awesome stuff. So I will just, on behalf of myself and Barry Rose, I give a salute to the good folks at Tom Jenkins Barbecue. But Barry Rose, now we go back to the Christmas cards. We'll go slightly past the Greg Good era, 1905, and get into some more modern type era stuff. Barry Rose, I note here in the article that I found, 1970, Tampa, Florida. We got Jose Lothario and Danny Miller defeating the Infernos to become the NWA Florida Tag Team Champions. Barry Rose, the Infernos were who?
So those Infernos, if I'm correct, would have been Frankie Kane, the Great Mephisto, and his partner, who was, this is going to kill me, which was Rocky Smith, I believe. I have a great Jose Lothario story to tell you.
Oh, please.
And I don't think we've ever discussed this on air. And I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that he was still alive. And I did not want to share this story.
Wait a
But
minute. Wait a minute.
uh,
Wait a minute. Barry
sure,
Rose, are you fixing to break kayfabe on something?
I am going to break kayfabe big time that I don't
Ooh!
believe this story has ever been told publicly.
Go ahead, lay it on us.
So, and I think I may have told you this story privately.
I
Jose
think you have.
Lothario had an amazing run in the state of Florida and was here 5 or 6 years and was a top guy. If he wasn't in the main event, he was in the semi-main event, but really got over, really popular and did extremely well. His last match in the state of Florida was against Dory Funk Jr. for the NWA World's title in 1970 in West Palm Beach. So this wasn't, pardon me too, as I'm burping up all this iced coffee, but This wasn't a guy that was doing the time honored tradition of working his way down the card and doing jobs. He literally went out with like a 1 hour draw against Dory Funk Jr., and then he was gone. And it never made sense to me because that wasn't the way that Eddie Graham did business, right? I mean, you knew it. In the old days in the territories, if you were leaving a territory, there was a reason. And you would either lose or leave town match or you would do jobs to build up the territory. Jose went out on top and was gone. And I never understood it until years later when I heard the real story. Jeff, should I break kayfabe and tell you the story of why Jose left?
Hold on. One, two, three, go. Break kayfabe.
So Jose, while he was in the state of Florida, apparently got married or had a partner and had several children. And from everything I've gathered, that made him a bigamist, as he
Oh no.
had a total other family in Texas. So I don't know if his departure was legal, that possibly this was a legality that he had to get out of the state, or possibly one of his wives found out. I don't know exactly those details, but I do know that the reason he left was he had a whole nother family living in Texas. So he
Oh
had a
my.
family in Florida and one in Texas.
Did he ever come back to CWF?
Never. And that's another thing. He never came back. Again, a guy that had spent 5 or 6 years working main events in Florida, always pushed a favorite of Eddie Graham, never worked another match in the state of Florida his entire life. I think there could have been a legal reason.
Well, there have been other wrestlers that you and I know of that for legal reasons could not come
Yeah.
into the state of Florida lest they be troubled by the law. So let's go to a couple other areas here. Just as a shout out to our friend Kevin Orcutt out there in the great Pacific Northwest. 1975, Barry, in Portland, Dutch Savage and Jimmy Snuka win the Pacific Northwest title from the Royal Kangaroos. Jonathan Boyd and Norman Frederick Charles, Royal Kangaroos, terrific heel team. And of course, we have discussed ad nauseum how great Jonathan Boyd was on the mic. Tremendous heel. But I find it interesting, Barry, 1975, Jimmy Snuka already headlining an area. And, you wonder, it was one of those things where how old is this guy? How long has he been wrestling? That was always kind of a mystery when he broke nationally after his run in New York with Backlund. And people tried to figure out exactly how old this guy was. Well, here he was in 1975 being put over as a main eventer in Portland. Hope you can't hear my boys going crazy. Obviously, we have a jogger going by. So let's go forward. We got 1977, Barry, in Minnesota. We got the tuxedo match as the Crusher defeats one of your favorites, Barry, Lord Alfred Hayes. So we got the gimmick match of the tuxedo matches. It puts to mind Barry Rose, of course, one of my all-time favorite Florida memories was the weasel suit match that they did with Rufus R. Jones and I think was it JJ?
It was JJ,
Yeah, I'm gonna put
correct?
him in a weasel suit. They did that gimmick in the AWA also with Bobby Heenan, I think, versus maybe Greg Gagne, and it always ended up where Gagne put Heenan to sleep. They put him in the weasel suit, and he wakes up and starts chasing his tail as he's trying to figure out why he's in a weasel suit. It was always good fun. Heenan was always good for a laugh. Let's see
Yeah.
here. Now
Talk
let's go.
about Rufus R. Jones for a minute there, Jeff.
Yeah, please.
The mystery of Rufus R. Jones, and he had he had this kind of charisma, indescribable charisma is the way I could, like Dusty, you understood. Superstar Billy Graham, that type of charisma you understood. Rufus R. Jones, I never really understood any of it. However, he did have this bizarre way of connecting to the crowd. He was not good in the ring, and that's not a knock. I mean,
That's to be
just,
polite, also, by the way.
and that's being really polite. He was not, quote unquote, a good worker, and his promos didn't, there wasn't a lot there with his promos either. That they weren't exactly the most coherent promos, would be the way to put it. Yet somehow this guy always found a way to somehow ingratiate himself into main events. And he worked the AWA, as you just pointed out. And this was a territory that was not known for working with black professional wrestlers. If there was ever a white territory or promotion, it would have been the AWA, right? Like, let's be honest, it really was. Can you name me 5 black wrestlers that worked in the AWA? I'm sure that there were. I just can't name them.
Well,
And
I think if they went up there, Barry, I think their time up there was extremely limited. You know, uh,
And
e-
of
e-
course, the irony is, Jeff, Vern Gagne had a reputation, which you're aware of. We've talked about it, that Vern enjoyed. I believe you once said it to me. Vern enjoyed brown sugar,
yes, he did.
and he did, but he wouldn't push black wrestlers.
Yeah.
Somehow, Rufus, of all people, got the push in that territory, which was really bizarre.
Well, so Rufus, I know he had a run in Mid Atlantic for a while. I know
Yep.
he was kind of a big deal in the Kansas City territory. Uh, I don't want to say he was a homesteader, but he was pretty close to being a homesteader up there. And he comes down to Florida, and just the interviews were almost I'll try to be polite as possible. Reminded me of the tremendous old Bill Cosby cartoon, Fat Albert and the Cosby Kids. Uh,
Mushmouth.
yeah, Mushmouth. He was, just like unintelligible. Was not a good worker, but as you said, was put into spots where he could get over, and he was. It was almost like a comedy, figure. The way that some guys
100%.
were. What's that?
100%. He was 100%. Yes.
And but he was usually like put in tag situations, or gimmick matches like we just talked about, or he was in a tag situation with a partner who could go in and do all the work and then give the hot tag to Rufus would come in, he would do the comedy spots to give him like the butt, sort of like Iceman King Parsons kind of thing. And
Yeah.
then when he would be put in a match with somebody like JJ could do the bumps, carry the comedy portion of the match by taking the bumps. Rufus would put him in the weasel suit. And it was funny because I remember when I had bought the J.J. Dillon biography, I had him, because I remembered that feud. For whatever reason, I remember that feud. I had him autograph his biography for me. And his personalized autograph was, "Jeff, don't let life put you in a weasel suit, J.J. Dillon." And of course, like a lot of the great wrestling books I have, I gave those to a certain somebody who I no longer am in contact with. I think you know what I'm talking about there. And never saw those books again. Go figure. But everything's my fault when it comes to photographs. So next, Barry, we're going to go to 1978. Now, at this point, I think this is when Bill Watts had taken over officially the any portion of the Leroy McGurk territory. So they combined the Oklahoma territory with the old Mid South territory, and now he was really starting to get talent brought in. And he, I believe this card might have been in the Superdome, because Bill Watts did have those Superdome cards, because at this point this is when New Orleans really started taking off. Now this was before JYD really started exploding on the scene. But in 1978 in Louisiana, we have, what the hell is that? I have no idea why that came up. A little pop up there for me. Our headline was Andre and Dusty winning the vacant U.S. titles against a team
Yeah.
of Stan Hansen and Ernie Ladd. 1978, that's a pretty formidable tag team, Barry.
Oh, I mean, that is Ernie Ladd. If you got the chance to see Ernie Ladd in the 70s, I think by the time the 80s rolled around, his knees were already bad in the 70s. In the 60s, even his knees were bad. But by the 80s, he was in bad shape with his knees. But what an intelligent heel. Ernie Ladd, to me, will be one of the most underrated performers in the history of professional wrestling from a psychology standpoint. I saw him do shit when he turned heel. in 1977 when he was working the state of Florida. He was part of this super tag team with Dusty Rhodes, and then he turned on Dusty in Miami Beach, and it had been a build for a month at least.
Well,
But
Barry,
he
Barry,
yes,
that is because if you remember, he went to tag Dusty out, and Dusty was talking to the fans. He was
he
getting
was signing
autographs.
autographs.
That,
Dusty was signing
that was
autographs.
completely Dusty's fault, as I remember.
100%. Ernie was focused on the match. Dusty is signing autographs. He's not paying attention. Ernie finally had enough, and that was it. But there was almost a riot. That was the closest and I've told this story, 80,000 times, but that was the closest I was ever into being in a wrestling riot, to the point that one of the cops that was friends with my dad was like, follow me, and brought us in through the back to get us out because it was breaking down. Dusty at that point too was, God in the state of Florida. But Ernie had a way, psychologically, Ernie had a way that very few heels ever had. Ultimate respect for Ernie Ladd.
And of course, Ernie with the classic line with Gordon Soley. This might have been in Georgia, but when he's doing a promo and he says, Mr. Soley, I smell whiskey. Do you smell whiskey?
Yes.
And I was watching some video on either Facebook or YouTube yesterday, and it was when it must have been I'm guessing 1980 when Oliver Humperdinck brought in Ernie Ladd, and I think he was going after maybe Manny Fernandez, and
Yeah.
and then he did that because it was the whole gimmick where he did the leg drop, and Gordon Soley there had been a masked man that came in the week before that had delivered a very similar looking leg drop, and Gordon Soley, truly the Walter Cronkite of professional wrestling, as a journalist, felt compelled to confront Ernie Ladd about whether or not he was the mysterious man who had come off the top rope with that leg drop. And, Ernie, of course, I don't know what you're talking about, Mr. Announcer. But that kind of tag match, getting back to the Superdome thing or the New Orleans thing, I'm almost positive it was in the Superdome. But Andre and Dusty in 1978 versus Stan Hansen and Ernie Ladd, that's the kind of headline match that could really draw a crowd. I'm sure you would agree, Barry.
Oh God. I mean, if you're asking me for a match that I'd want to see, yeah, I'd want to see that match too. And we should say Ernie Ladd had a couple of finishers, but one of them was the leg drop. This was also decades before the late Hulk Hogan came up with that finisher and used that for so many years. But Ernie Ladd, Stan Hansen as a worker never really got the due in this country. And I think that was by choice as well. But Stan Hansen was just incredible. But look, Bill Watts, and I hope he's doing well. I know there's been some health issues. Bill Watts, in the 70s into the early 80s, was there a better booker than Bill Watts? I don't think that there was.
Well, and the tragic thing about Ernie Ladd, besides his obvious problem with the knees and stuff like that, that debilitating thumb injury that he'd suffered, it could never seem to heal, and it was tragic. I wish my wife Kim, being the certified hand therapist, could have assisted Ernie back in the day to get that thumb rehab because it was always taped. He was accused of perhaps using that thumb, the tape thumb, to the throat. I never saw any video evidence of that, Barry. I don't know about you, but poor Ernie with those, the knee injury, the thumb. But he was tremendous. Great, great stuff always. So next, Barry, and think about it. The last thing I want to say, Stan Hansen going to Louisiana to wrestle in that main event was just, I believe, coming off the run with Bruno and the WWF. So he was getting all the big play in the magazines and stuff like that. Then he comes down to Louisiana and he's teaming up with Ernie Ladd. Wow, that's good shit, Barry. In Memphis, I just want to point out Christmas night in 1978, the headline match was Austin Idol versus Jerry Lawler. But right underneath that was a Southern tag team match with Bill Dundee and Coco Ware. Barry, I believe you might be able to, after we're done discussing this, talk a little Coco Ware, perhaps coming to a venue in the near future that you could tell us about. But teaming up to face one of the all-time great underrated tag teams, Barry, Dennis Condrey and Phil Hickerson. So before we start talking about that tag team, Barry Rhodes, can you drop a little Coco Ware intel for us?
Yeah, there's nothing definite, but Coco Ware is one of those guys. So if you go back to Coco Ware, and granted, the most success he ever had would have been UWF to the WWF, where he became the Birdman. And but if you go back to his Memphis stuff, I think Coco is one of the unheralded great workers in pro wrestling. His stuff in Memphis, this guy was incredible. So we are working with Coco. We're hopeful to make it work, that we can have him at the upcoming Glory Days GrappleCon 4, taking place April the 11th in the beautiful Tampa suburb of Lutz. We're kind of going with the theme of gimmick mania, and really having the Birdman there would kind of fit into it. But Coco was fantastic. Then you're talking about Dennis Condrey and Phil Hickerson. And we did a show on Breaking Kayfabe with Bowdrin and Barry years ago, and I want to say it was maybe unheralded tag teams, less famous tag teams. And I remember you brought up specifically Ivan Koloff and Alexei Smirnoff, and that was something I think Kevin Sullivan had mentioned that to you, what a great team they were. But one of the teams we discussed was Hickerson and Condrey, and they were out of control. I saw them in Knoxville, which I think was 78, when I was there for the WFIA convention. First off, Phil Hickerson never got on a national stage. Phil Hickerson in his prime was just amazing. As a team, these guys, I think, were one of the best teams going.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about not only the team that Condrey had with Hickerson, but also that he had with David Schultz.
Yes.
Just the
Yes.
epitome of nasty Southern bully heels that had their runs. They were basically the Memphis version of the Anderson brothers. Guys that if they gave you a look, if you were giving them heat at ringside and they gave you a look, you just shut up. Because you did not want these guys deciding they were going to get out of the ring and come confront you, because they really would put the intimidation factor into full effect. Barry, just curious, if Coco is secured as talent to appear at the next GrappleCon, do you have to pay a separate talent fee if he brings Frankie?
I would love. I don't believe he has Frankie, but on that note, if anybody's got a large macaw or parrot, whatever it is, please, because I think yes, and you would have to pay a separate fee. I'd have to pay for Frankie to be there, so yes. I think that's super cool. Jeff, I can go ahead and announce a name or two if you want me to.
What?
Oh yeah, we added 3 names this week, which would have not been announced publicly. So much like those other things, like the Jose Lothario, I'm breaking kayfabe. You're hearing it here first.
This is twice in this show. Go ahead, Barry.
So the Demon, Dale Torborg, obviously Father Jeff Torborg, the Kiss Demon is going to be there. We were able to finalize negotiations with him this week. He does not do shows, and we were able to come to terms. So this is a really rare appearance for the Kiss Demon. So if you are a fan of WCW in its later years, this is a great opportunity to meet him. And again, fits right in with Gimmick Mania. The other is another great gimmick, which is the WWE's tag team, the Headbangers. They will be joining Glory Days GrappleCon and joining us as well. Kind of cool that we have 2 tag teams between the Godwins and the Headbangers that will both be part of the Gimmick Mania Q&A panel. So very excited about that, Jeff.
So, if only, Barry Rose, we knew someone in our group and personally who was a big fan of Kiss. Now, would that person perhaps hear that the Kiss Demon is going to be there and think to himself, I might have to give up going to see some crappy local band in front of 30 people in the Pittsburgh, PA area, and make the run down to Tampa and to Lutz to see the Kiss Demon, to continue my Kiss fandom. I digress, Barry. I can't imagine who I'm talking about. Barry Rose. Next up, we're going to 1979, Christmas time in Atlanta, GA. I think by this time they were at the as Freddie Miller used to call it, the Omni. They were no longer in the city
The
auditorium.
Omni.
We got Jack and Jerry Briscoe taking on the Masked Superstar and Austin Idol for the Georgia Tag Team Championships. That's pretty good stuff right there, Barry. That's a nice main event.
Yeah, fuck that. Let's talk about the Omni. That was great. I haven't thought about that in 40 something years. So, Freddie, I loved Freddie Miller, right? Do you think that was intentional, or do you think that was just the way he said Omni, the Omni?
I think that's just the way he said it. And can we agree? Okay, I'm gonna break kayfabe. I'm gonna put this out to you, Barry. Unannounced question. Barry Rose, very considerate, serious consideration. You need to get to this wrestling related question.
All right.
Worst to pay, Freddie Miller or Bruno in the late '70s?
Well, I wasn't aware that Freddie was wearing a toupee.
Oh my God!
So you just broke kayfabe, which then by default means Bruno, because everybody knew that shit on Bruno's head was a fucking muskrat. So yeah. All right, how about this, Jeff? Worst toupee in professional wrestling, whether they're an active wrestler or retired wrestler, who had the worst toupee? Was it Bruno?
um,
There's a couple of others that are out there.
lay it on me. Who else?
Well, our good friend Ron Fuller
Well,
has been wearing a
maybe,
toupee for years, and
maybe.
yeah, and Tony Marino.
Oh, now that's a
So I
yeah.
don't know if you,
That was a definite yes.
and Tony Marino, he worked Florida in '77, one night in West Palm Beach, and that I forget who it was, but that shit got yanked right off his head. Somebody yanked that toupee right off his head. And do you remember there was a story in the early '90s where Rod Price was working in somewhere in, do you remember the story, working in Texas
I do
and
recall that now.
didn't have a toupee, but I think had plugs. And Chris Adams actually yanked it out of his head. And apparently there was blood everywhere. Like it was just a mess. So yeah, those were really bad. There were a few though. Who else had a really bad toupee that I'm
Well,
forgetting?
first of all, before I give you my next one, I'll just say, shocking to hear that at that point in his career, Chris Adams might have done something unhinged.
Yes.
There was some alcohol issues there, as well as I think Barry some pretty obvious mental health issues that may have
Yep.
started because of his alcohol issues. Barry, the one I was thinking of, famously, I don't even know if I should say this person's name, but there is a relatively legendary performer who I may have just mentioned earlier without discussing this, who had someone put him in a headlock or something like that, and famously said, "Hey, don't touch the rug, brother! Don't touch the rug." It was a wrestler who was famous for his appearances in Memphis, in Atlanta, and who may have come out of the Tampa area, having been friends with some of the sons of Eddie Graham. Do you have any idea who I'm talking about there, Barry Rose?
Sounds like you're talking about Austin Idol.
I am neither confirming nor denying for litigious reasons. But yes, he famously supposedly told somebody, "Hey, don't get near the rug, brother. Don't touch the rug." So next up, Barry Rose, Christmas of 1979 in Charlotte. Now, not that this was the main event, I just think this is a pretty interesting matchup for Charlotte. We had Jumping Jim Brunzell, former guest here on Breaking Kid with Bowder and Barry, great guest as I recall on our Patreon
Yeah.
edition,
Good guy.
taking on Ray Stevens. So that might have been Ray Stevens was still pretty. He hadn't quite started to backslide on his career yet. He was still a top-notch performer. The folks in Charlotte getting a good, solid match there, Barry Rose.
Yeah, and Ray Stevens too, for all intents and purposes, apparently the backslide occurred in the late '60s. I believe it was a motorcycle or a motorbike accident, and apparently he was never quite the same. But tell that to the millions of fans that saw him, because they all thought he was still the GOAT, right? Ray Stevens, even in his later years, overweight, never a tall guy either, right? Is a guy that was relatively short, 5'7", maybe 5'8", and always, not a guy that frequented the gym, which is probably putting it mildly. Didn't matter. There was a guy that could go and make it look real and had the respect of everyone in the locker room. Ray Stevens was a goat, and Jim Brunzell, really the definition of an athletic professional wrestler. You know, why he didn't have a bigger career, I'm not sure. And certainly had a great career. Was definitely a homesteader for the most part with the AWA, and the part of it, the tag team with Greg Gagne, the High Flyers, for I don't know, 5 to 8 to 10 years, something like that. Then transitions to the WWE and becomes part of a great tag team there. But Jim Brunzell, first off, great guy, great guest, as you said, but just a really decent human being as well. But a really solid worker. And it was kind of nice to see him go to the Carolinas in Mid Atlantic. And I think he was Mid Atlantic champion at one point. Uh, just did extremely well. But how could this match not have been a great match between these two?
Jim Brunzell is the definition of a guy that was perfect for a babyface tag team.
Yeah.
This was a guy who, we've talked before about Nick Gulas and how Nick Gulas, his son George, got in the business, and they put him with Bobby Eaton as part of the Jet Set, and Bobby Eaton was a perfect partner for George Gulas. And I think in many ways, although I'm not comparing Greg Gagne to George Gulas because Greg was certainly a better worker and wrestler than George Gulas, but Jim was a perfect partner for Greg because Jim could go in there, I think, could do most of the heavy lifting in the ring, get the hot tag into Greg, and Greg would go in there and kick ass. And he was a great, perfect component for a babyface tag team, whether it was his size or his lack of, while he did have charisma, he didn't have that over the top charisma that Vern was maybe looking for to push
Right.
him, as a single. And speaking of that, our next card from 1979 from St. Paul, the obviously going to the Twin Cities, the Crusher and Lord Al Hayes taking on Nick Bockwinkel and Bobby Heenan. There was the time when Bobby Heenan had worked Georgia. Famously, the story was that he went to Booker Ole Anderson and said, "Hey, are you going to keep me here? Because if you are, I'm going to buy a house." And Ole said, "Oh, absolutely. We love you here." Bobby goes out and buys a house. And then a week later, Ole gives him his notice. And so Bobby goes back up to Minnesota to work the Twin City area and the AWA for Vern. So here we got Al Hayes, who had been the heel manager while Bobby was gone. And he's now teaming up with the Crusher to take on Nick Bockwinkel and Bobby Heenan. That must have been, while it wasn't a stellar work rate as far as entertainment value,
Oh, yeah.
Bockwinkel and Heenan, you couldn't go wrong with that, Bear.
You really couldn't too. I always wondered too the backstory because Heenan had been such a staple in the AWA and the old WWA with Crusher and Dick the Bruiser, and then all of a sudden he winds up in Georgia, and then Blackjack Lanza is in Georgia with him as well. What was the story? What happened that led to him going to Georgia? Do you know?
I don't, our old friend George Shire, maybe we can reach out to him and ask him that question because, it might have just been a case where they wanted to freshen up the territory and,
Yeah.
basically, go away for a little while, then we're going to bring you back. And, of course, he stayed in the AWA until he eventually left, like, I don't know, was it 5, 6 years later to go up to Vince. But he was such a supremely talented individual. Now, Barry Rose, we go into, let's see, we're going into the 80s. And we're going 1982 Dallas, Texas. And we discussed it a little bit in the opening. That match with Kerry versus Ric Flair, one of my top 100 matches. I think it might have been in my top 20. Not just because it was a good match in the ring, but everything else that happened with Hayes and Gordy, the spectacle, and David Von Erich running into the ring and grabbing the house mic after. And now I understand, Freebirds. You tricked me because the Freebirds, of course, let's remember, had been brought in as baby faces and
Yeah.
were assisting the Von Erichs, and now they've turned on him. And this literally It's like the beginning of the old TV show Mission Impossible when you had the match and you put it to the gunpowder and the fuse starts just going off. And that's exactly what happened to World Class, Barry Rose. That territory literally in one single action, boom, exploded.
That was, look, that's a historic moment, right? I think when you're looking at historic moments in professional wrestling, that's right at the very top, because what it did was it reignited a territory and arguably became the hottest territory in the entire US for the next year or two, right? So what a roster at the time. But Freebirds as baby faces, that was a smart move to bring them in as a baby face and then turn them. And they became the perfect, here you had your hometown boys, the Von Erichs. They could do no wrong in that territory, in that area. And all of a sudden, you've got these southern rednecks, the Freebirds, and the fans just ate this shit up. They popped the houses. They were drawing. This was the hottest territory in the country at the time.
Yeah, it was, I try to quantify and explain to people that weren't around just how incredibly over, not just the Von Erichs were, the Freebirds were, and,
Yeah.
it could not have been really safe for those guys to go out, because of just how. Now, the funny thing is who is it that takes credit for what happened? Okay, was it the popularity of the Von Erichs? I don't think the Von Erichs were that crazy popular going into that event. I mean, they were popular, just not like insane like they became over the next couple of years. But as far as who came up creatively with the idea, there's a story that it was Gary Hart, who I think was in Atlanta, but who, of course, was famously had friends with the Von Erich family for years, that he says it was his idea. I've heard, Michael Hayes say he was the one that, gave them the idea to come in and do all this. So, was it Fritz that had an idea? Was it, I think David Manning may have said he had something to do with it, for God's sakes. But just so many people wanted to take credit for this great angle. And quite frankly, as a booker of some note, I don't necessarily blame them because it was so crazy. And, you want to take credit for something that ended up being so successful, Barry.
Yeah, and you're right about that, because I've heard 10 different people take credit for it. And on that note, David Manning, I think, takes credit for everything that's ever occurred on the face of the earth. So I'm not quite sure he's where I would go, but look, let's also look at it this way. It wasn't that this was such an outlandish, creative, booking philosophy either, right? Like, this is kind of simple. It's just one of these things that caught fire and really resonated with the crowd. It was a very smart decision, but I mean, look, it was a heel turn. It was a heel turn and a little more creative in the slamming of the cage. But again, it wasn't like I think somebody had to sit down and go through, like this long, convoluted storyline. You didn't. But it did. It changed the territory, and I think it changed it for at least a year and a half to 2 years.
So interestingly, I'm going down to 1983 now, and I want to go to Mid Atlantic. Mid Atlantic was just coming off the very first Starcade, which of course was the template for just how to do a big show. But get a load of this, Barry. Apparently, they double shotted that day, Christmas Day. The Crockett's always giving due credit to their boys by having them work a double shot on Christmas. How nice is that? So we're starting off in Greenville, South Carolina. The main event, Barry, we got Ricky Steamboat and Jay Youngblood against Dick Slater and Bob Orton Jr. I'm sure that was a pretty crappy match, with the talent they had. Then the boys got to drive to Charlotte, and in Charlotte, Ricky Steamboat and Jay Youngblood in a steel cage match against Jack and Jerry Briscoe. So, boy, I really hope Ricky and Jay had their working shoes on Christmas Day, Barry.
And you know that they did. I mean, that's and both of those matches were probably out of control and amazing. The Briscoes as a heel team, I love Jack and Jerry as baby faces, but boy, their heel stuff. I know that they never would have done that in Florida. God, I would have loved to have seen them work the state of Florida as heels. I know it never would have happened, but that would have been amazing. And Slater and Orton. So at that stage, I think Slater's best days were probably already behind him. He was a guy that peaked really early and then he flipped. Dick Slater went from Dick Slater and became Terry Funk Jr. And that's not a bad thing, but he was doing a lot of Terry Funk. But Dick Slater, to me, especially in the mid 70s, up till maybe 78, 79, might have been one of the best workers in the entire country. Orton Jr. as well. Orton Jr. was a guy that we famously talked about, got his first big break in the state of Florida in 1976 when Jack Briscoe went to the office, and Jack Briscoe went to the office and basically said, this Orton Jr. guy has got all the talent. He goes, I'd like to drop the Florida title to him to get him over. And Jack Briscoe, former NWA World's Heavyweight Champion, dropped the Florida title to Bob Orton Jr. Bob at that point was skyrocketed to the main events. It was, he was that good at that point. So I think that kind of, honestly, that's the kind of deal where I know one was Charlotte. What was the other town?
I believe it was Greenville, South Carolina.
Any idea what the distance between Greenville and Charlotte is?
No, I not right off the top of my head. The interesting thing, couple things. First of all, you said Jack and Jerry would have loved to have worked heel in Florida, but they never would have done it. But famously, when they had that program against Mike Graham and Steve Kern, and what is it? The Japanese team, was it Saito and Sato?
Yes.
Didn't they sort of work borderline like heel, or were they full fledged baby faces in that feud?
They were they were full-fledged baby faces with slight heelish tendencies.
Okay.
So the crowd, I want to say the crowd was evenly split. I might give a little bit to Graham and Kern, but Jack and Jerry were still, they were still loved in the state of Florida. So, and there was a lot of respect, the way it all came together. I think at the very end, they all kind of came together and worked together. But no, we would have. They were great, though. Don't get me wrong. And that version of the Briscoes was maybe my favorite version because they weren't baby faces playing to the crowd, where Graham and Kern still would. So, yeah, I absolutely love those guys.
So also, I just want to mention on the undercard, also working two matches against one another were Valentine and Piper, including in
Wow.
Charlotte. They did a dog collar match. So obviously, this was right before Piper had left because this might have been one of his last one or two matches because I think by early '84 he's already up in New York, doing stuff for Vince. So then we go back to Dallas for the infamous Star Wars card. You have David defeating Ric Flair who's the world champ by DQ. We've got Jose Lothario showing up to beat Black Gordman, who of course famously not from Mexico. He's from New Mexico. Jimmy
Still alive, Jeff. Black Gordman apparently still alive in his late 80s, and I believe living in, I think, the Bronx, New York, if I'm correct. So
Let's get him
yeah,
on the phone and book him for an appearance on this show, Barry.
I would love.
Oh my God!
I don't think Black Gordman. And first off, we should say this was the last I heard because, as you may have seen earlier this year, Cowboy Bob Ellis, who everyone was saying was one of the oldest living wrestlers alive, he's been dead for years at this point.
Yeah.
So there's a couple. So last I heard, Black Gordman was living in the Bronx with a family member. But if he is, I mean, if I could get him to a fan fest, Black Gordman and Goliath, fucking, these guys were unbelievable.
So, but based on what you're saying, you can now confirm that Bob Ellis will not be at GrappleCon 4.
Not can make a really tasteless joke.
Well,
He
there
will
you
not
go.
be at GrappleCon 4.
So, and also we had Jimmy Garvin facing off with Chris Adams, and Kevin and Mike showing up defeating Terry Gordy and Buddy Roberts in a loser leave town. This was when they first started moving the Freebirds out. They'd been there a year, and then of course afterward, it's like, we changed our mind. Come on back, boys. So finishing up, let's see here. We got 1984. Christmas Day, the Rock and Roll Express, Ricky and Robert defeating Ted DiBiase and Hercules Hernandez. Let's see. Why does that printer thing keep popping? I got this pop-up ad that keeps showing up in my face. Barry Rose, as we get into the 80s, it became more and more of a thing to have Christmas cards. We got in Atlanta in 1985, we got Flair versus Dusty Rhodes, a match we almost never saw during the 1980s, Barry. It's hard to believe those guys ever faced off with one another. Barry Rose, Christmas Day, as we wrap up this particular segment, Christmas Day wrestling. Of all of those cards, which one are you going back to saying, yeah, that's the one that definitely, when I think of a Christmas card in wrestling, that's the one I think of?
So I think, so I'm going to answer this in a two-parter. I think Jake Roberts dressed as Santa will always be the Christmas card for me. I think given the opportunity to be in Dallas when Gordy slammed that cage, the cage door, I would have loved to have been in the crowd for that.
Yeah, that would have been in both cases. You had, I'm going to say, well, not probably to the level of what you described with Ernie Ladd, the near riot. I think it was probably pretty close in both occasions because, as I recall, the fans at ringside in St. Pete were grabbing at Jake after they realized that it wasn't really Santa Claus, Barry, but and then Gordy, how Gordy and Hayes, they must have been hustled right out of that arena because the shit was breaking down, no question about it. So as we begin to wrap up, just want to give first of all, I want to tell a quick little story about something that happened recently that was kind of funny. So as I mentioned, my sister came up here for a visit, and we decided to take her to her and her daughter and the kids to the town of Helen, Georgia. Have you ever heard of Helen, Georgia, Barry?
No.
Helen, Georgia is famous because this is a town in the middle of nowhere in Georgia. Okay, sort of not quite in the mountains, but in the hills. And they basically recreated like a Swiss village in this town. Like the whole thing is like made up like it's a Swiss village, and
Wow.
it's a big tourist destination. So we're heading there, but before we get there, on the way, I think in beautiful metropolitan, I believe it's Cleveland, Georgia, definitely a hot spot, Barry. There in the middle of Cleveland, Georgia, Barry Rose is the place where they make Cabbage Patch dolls. Now, Barry Rose, I know your daughter was not of the age when Cabbage Patch dolls were really at their prime, but do you remember hearing about Cabbage Patch dolls?
Absolutely. I mean, look, it was, I don't think we see that at the same level now. And I think because of electronic video games and stuff, but the craze of toys and dolls in the 1980s just seemed to be crazy, right? Like it was, and Cabbage Patch at one, remember the pet rock shit, but Cabbage Patch dolls were the biggest things for a couple of years.
Yeah, every year, what would happen, and it is a call on my Toys R Us experience here, there was that one toy every Christmas season that just exploded. You had, whether it was Star Wars gimmicks, Transformers gimmicks, eventually we got into the electronics like the video games and stuff like that. But then you had stuff that like strawberry shortcake dolls were a big thing. My Pretty Pony was a big thing. But 1983 going into 1980.
Just to correct you, it's My Little Pony because I'm
Yes.
deep into that world, so I understand.
Well, I will bow to your better knowledge there on that.
I appreciate that.
But the Cabbage Patch doll insanity that was Christmas of 1983 when people would punch each other in line. And I mean, you had to get cops involved because when you got a shipment of Cabbage Patch dolls, man, people would lose their mind trying to get their kid one of those Cabbage Patch dolls. So apparently, my niece Scarlett was, of a certain age that she wanted to get a Cabbage Patch doll. So here we are. Now we're going to surprise her by taking her to the place that they make the Cabbage Patch dolls. Just as because obviously she's a mother of two kids now, and sort of a like nice little callback. So we go into this place, Barry Rose, and when you first walk in the door, Barry Rose, do you remember? I'm sure in South Florida, Bobby Rubino's.
Oh my God. Bobby Rubino's A Place for Ribs.
Yes. So Bobby Rubino's also famously a place where when you walked into Bobby Rubino's, it was like walking into a 70s time capsule because
Absolutely.
you had the wood paneling, but also you had the celebrity photos on the walls. You know, your Dean Martins, Frank Sinatra's, a lot of Italian celebrities. But so you
Yeah.
walk into this Cabbage Patch, and literally there's all these celebrity photos on the wall. It's just, you know, at one part it's like, oh, that's kind of cool, but it's like, what the heck are all these celebrity photos doing in a Cabbage Patch doll place? And I mean, literally everything from sports stars, movie stars, presidents, former presidents and stuff, and just a crazy array of different celebrities. So then we go in, and there's like a greeting table where the woman is dressed up like a nurse. Is this the first time you've ever been to this facility? No. Well, good news. We have an expectation of birth coming up here in the next few minutes. And we're like looking at one another like, say what? And, like, yeah, oh, yeah, just you'll see the crowd over there. So then the announcement starts. Nurse Jackie to maternity ward, please. Nurse Jackie to the maternity ward. And I'm like, what in the blue hell is going on? So then we go and they got all the gimmicks, not just the dolls, but like, you got your Cabbage Patch keychains and all that kind of stuff. Then you go over and there literally is this giant tree in the middle of the room, and it's all these little like plants around it, cabbage plants with the heads of the Cabbage Patch babies, okay? And so then the lady, the nurse comes out, the delivery nurse. She has one of those devices. Oh, I'm going to check to see if the plant is dilating, and all this. They're doing this gimmick like you're watching the birth of a kid. Okay.
Right.
Then we're going to give them. They have some sort of medicine they give them. Oh God, Imaginarium or something like that. Like this medicine. Oh, I have to give it to the plant to help with the delivery. Then the doll emerges, okay, and it's like covered like in placenta or whatever, and they have to towel off the new doll, and the baby's name is so and so, and I'm looking at my wife going, this is completely insane. This is completely insane, but yet it's one of those things I would tell you, Barry, if you're ever in that area, you have to go see it just for the insanity of like watching them birth a new doll. Oh my God, Barry, it was crazy.
I would sit there and mock it, which is probably not what they want. So that wouldn't make sense. So, quick question. How far from Helen, Georgia are you?
I think it's a little under an hour.
Oh, so you're not far at all then.
Yeah,
So
no,
I Googled it. I'm about 450 miles away.
yeah,
And I'm thinking that would be a nice little getaway to be able to do that. So
yeah,
if I pull the trigger on this and we can make this happen, we absolutely have to get together.
yeah. It's a great time. So as we wrap up, one last thing, Barry Rose, we're gonna make it here in an hour. I suggested something to you in the form of a television show on HBO. Barry Rose, have you finished Task?
Absolutely. I finished Task on Wednesday. It's only 7 episodes. It is it's not when it's over, I don't think you're up dancing. It's not one of those types of shows. It is there's a lot of sadness to it, but there's no flaw in the show. It is well written, well directed, well acted. The storyline, everything about it is great. It's also very unusual. I don't want to give any spoilers, but there is a lot about this show which I feel is very unique and very unusual. I think as a drama goes, I think this is probably one of the best dramas I've seen in years.
So, just very quickly, it's a story about there's a group of thieves who are stealing from drug dealers.
Yep.
And what happens is this catches the eye of local authorities and the FBI, and the FBI assembles a task force, hence the title, which the actor Mark Ruffalo is heading up. He is almost semi-retired with the FBI, but he's called to lead this task force of different law enforcement officers from the state, local jurisdiction, and meanwhile, Mark Ruffalo is dealing with his own problems at home, which include the death of his wife that he's still trying to get over. But just tremendous acting. And as Barry said, I called him and said, "Man, I got to tell you, this takes place right outside of your old homestead of Philadelphia, and it is not something that makes me extremely eager to go visit Philadelphia, to say the least." So, just very quickly, Barry, as they were talking about different towns and different locations, were these things that were familiar to you, having lived outside of Philadelphia for years?
Oh, absolutely. I was there for 17 years. So they did a really good job of trying to crowbar as many references to the area as possible. I mean, his daughter works at Rita's Water Ice, which is essentially a Philadelphia staple. Now, I mean, we have them down here in Florida, but that started in Philadelphia. But everything about the show, even the accents, were Philadelphia accents. So as far as being authentic, to me, it was 100% authentic.
I can't.
Everything about it. But Mark Ruffalo, who I believe was executive producer as well of the show, really just did an incredible job. This is next level acting and production on this.
Yeah, I will only say I can't believe they did not have one episode where the task force decided to have lunch at John's Roast Pork, because that would have
Or
been,
had cheesesteak.
yeah, exactly. That would have been good stuff. Well, anyway, on that note, we will say Merry Christmas. Barry, do you still have your glass? Still have your glass? Let's
Yes, sir.
keep everybody, put it on camera there, Barry. Put it on
It's
camera.
on.
Yeah, no, now it's on camera. There you go. That's my Notre Dame cup. That's your Whataburger cup. I raise all of you a glass and toast to the Christmas season. Happy holidays, happy New Year from those of us here at Breaking Kayfabe with Bowden and Barry. Salute! Merry Christmas, folks.
Salute.